The topic is President Obama's education plan, and we're fortunate to have with us to talk about that education plan Dr. PMillet from the College of Education at Tennessee State University. Dean, let's see if we can pick up where we left off before the first commercial break by talking about, from your perspective, talking about President Obama's education plan, period. Let's talk about it from that perspective.
Okay. Well, I'm very pleased to talk about the education plan, because the thing with the plan, about the education plan, is lots of people have heard about it, that there is an education plan, but very few people know any of the details of the plan. So I'm pleased to share some of that with you. Let me introduce this discussion by kind of laying the groundwork, by saying something about how I see the educational system that we've got in the United States currently. And based on this discussion, then we can talk specifically about the plan. As I see it, there are a number of areas of concern that we currently have in the educational system. One of them involves the preparation and retention of teachers in the school system. One of them involves the success rates of our students in the school system. Are they going through to graduation and being successful in the school? And the third one is the rising cost of a college education. So let me just talk briefly about each one of those, and then I'll get right into the plan. The first one talks about teachers that are in the school system. One of the problems that we see with teachers is that there is a very high attrition rate with teachers. They tend not to stay in the field. Of teachers that are in the field at any one time, approximately 30% of them leave the profession within the first 5 years. Approximately 50% of teachers are going to leave within the first 9 years. Of the teachers that remain, a challenge that we have is, because of the scarcity that we have, particularly in some high demand areas, math, science, special education, English language learners, those kind of things, sometimes we have teachers who are teaching outside of their areas of expertise. The unfortunate part is that sometimes when the first day of class comes, we have to have someone in the classroom. Someone's got to be in front. So that's a problem that we've got with the teachers. In terms of the student performance in the classroom, there's another challenge. Currently in the United States, at any one time, approximately 65 to 70% of students graduate. So that leaves, we've got about 30-some% of people do not get a high school diploma. Now, if you're a member of certain groups, if you're a member of a Hispanic group, African American, economically disadvantaged, then your graduation rate is going to be even lower. Now, the problem that has is that it causes a number of other challenges. Now you've got problems with unemployment, underemployment. Many of the people that are currently incarcerated are going to have less than a high school graduation rate. So those are some of the kind of things that you see. Now, the problem with high school is that the problem doesn't really begin in high school. The problem begins much earlier. We need to look back at middle school, 6th grade, 7th grade, and we're going to find that children who have problems in 6th grade, 7th grade, problems with attendance, discipline problems, performing poorly in certain classes like math, science, English, those children are going to be less likely to graduate. Only 10% of them are going to graduate by the time they should, after 4 years of high school. Even if you look in this country right now, only about 50% of the adults read at less than an 8th grade level. And the average newspaper is written at the 5th or 6th grade level. So we've got a number of challenges with this. Let me talk about the third one, and then I'll get directly into the economic plan. The first one I talked about was teachers. The second one I talked about was the challenge of the school. The final one is the cost of a college education. The cost of college education has steadily risen, and over the last 5 years, it's risen by 40%. That makes it very difficult for average working families to obtain a college education. The average student, when they do graduate, they've got about $19,000 or $20,000 in debt, and that's very difficult to pay off. When you look at graduation rates by demographic group, you'll see about 12% of Hispanic persons with a college degree, 16% of African Americans, 33% of whites will have a college degree. So if you look at those three different areas that I've described, those are going to be the primary areas that President Obama's plan are going to address.
Very good. Very good.
Now, let me switch gears a little bit and talk about his plan specifically. Now, his plan is going to address all of those areas And let me just give you the headings, and then I'll talk a little bit about each one. Okay. One of them is going to look at early childhood education. That's going to be children from birth up until around age 4 or 5. Then it's going to look at traditional school-age children, kindergarten through 12th grade. It's going to look at higher education, so this is people getting a college degree or higher. And then it's going to look at problems or challenges to deal with teacher preparation. Now, if I just look at the first one and talk about that for just a moment, here's how the plan looks at early childhood education. President Obama's plan recognized that in order for children to be successful, they have to have an early foundation in terms of appropriate social, cognitive, emotional, and physical development. That's going to start early on in childhood. So one of his initiatives is going to recommend universal preschool for everyone. You know,
is this the Head Start kind of example? Is that preschool?
This one is even going to be before.
Okay, good.
Right. Preschool is going to be right before kindergarten, and before that you've got Head Start. So this plan talks about both of them. There's one that's going to put additional funding in preschools to enable families to be able to pay for and support it. And also there's going to be an emphasis at early Head Start programs, and these are going to be children from birth through 3 to try to get them started. Now, the reason that this is significant is because early childhood, this is where we lay the foundation in terms of they can get nutritious meals, they can get their vaccinations, they can get their immunizations, they can have appropriate intellectual stimulation. So it is very important that we have an appropriate levels of intervention for early childhood. So those are some kind of things you see for the early childhood. Now, in terms of K through 12, one of the significant impacts is going to be a reform of No Child Left Behind. Okay. Now, we're all familiar with the No Child Left Behind, and there were a number of important points that were related to that. No Child Left Behind really had some strong, valid tenets. And let me just give you 2 primary ones. One was that all children would have reach appropriate educational benchmarks. Second one is that every child would have a highly qualified teacher in his or her class.
Okay, I think that this might be appropriate to stop at this particular moment here and make preparations for our second commercial break. Okay. And then we'll come back and give you an opportunity to pick up at that. But that's essentially what we wanted to get, the kind of information that you're giving us now, because I think that people can look at this information, can hear this information, and have a fairly good idea in terms of what Mr. Obama is talking about dealing with his education plan. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break, and we'll pick up at that point. The topic is President